My name is Jessica, and I never thought I would be the girl who gets caught in a love triangle. At 26, I believed I had enough life experience to spot red flags and avoid messy situations. But sometimes, love doesn't follow the script we write for ourselves. Sometimes it crashes into your life like a freight train, leaving destruction in its wake before circling back to ask for forgiveness. If you are watching this and have ever felt like someone's second choice, drop a comment below about where you are watching from and hit that subscribe button because this story might just change how you view relationships forever. 2 years ago, I was living my best single life in Portland, working as a marketing coordinator for a sustainable clothing brand and spending weekends hiking with friends or trying new restaurants downtown. My apartment was small but perfectly decorated, my career was on track, and I had finally reached that place where being alone felt empowering rather than lonely. I had sworn off dating apps after too many disappointing coffee meetings and was genuinely content focusing on myself. That all changed on a rainy Thursday evening in March when I ducked into grind coffee to escape a sudden downpour. The place was packed with people seeking shelter from the storm, and I found myself standing awkwardly by the door, dripping wet and scanning for an empty table. That was when I heard someone call out, "Hey, you can share my table if you want. I have plenty of room." I turned to see a man with dark hair and kind eyes gesturing toward the empty chair across from him. He was maybe 30, wearing a navy sweater that looked expensive but not pretentious, and had this warm smile that immediately put me at ease. "I'm David," he said, as I gratefully sat down, wringing rainwater from my hair. "And you look like you just survived a tsunami." We ended up talking for 3 hours. David was an architect who had moved to Portland 6 months earlier for a job with a firm specializing in eco-friendly buildings. He was passionate about sustainable design, loved obscure documentaries, and had this way of listening that made me feel like the most interesting person in the room. When the rain finally stopped, neither of us wanted to leave. "This might sound crazy," he said as we gathered our things, "but would you maybe want to get dinner sometime? Like an actual planned dinner, not just accidental coffee sharing during a storm?" Our first official date was at a small Italian restaurant in the Pearl District. David showed up with a single sunflower because he said roses were too predictable, and he had noticed the sunflower pin on my jacket the night we met. It was such a thoughtful detail that I felt my carefully constructed walls beginning to crumble. Over the next 6 weeks, we fell into an easy rhythm. David would text me good morning messages that always included some random fact he had learned, like how honey never spoils or that octopi have 3 hearts. We took long walks through Forest Park, Spent Market, and I introduced lazy Sunday mornings at the farmer's him to my favorite hole-in-the-wall taco place, while he showed me architectural details around the city I had never noticed. He was different from anyone I had dated before. Where other men had been either overly eager or frustratingly distant, David struck the perfect balance. He pursued me consistently, but never made me feel pressured. He remembered small things I mentioned in passing and showed genuine interest in my work and opinions. When I told him about my complicated relationship with my mother, he listened without trying to offer solutions. When I shared my dream of eventually starting my own marketing consultancy, he asked thoughtful questions about my business plan. By the end of April, I was completely smitten. We had not made anything official yet, but we were seeing each other exclusively and spending most weekends together. My friends adored him, and even my notoriously picky sister Sarah gave her approval after meeting him at my birthday dinner. "He looks at you like you hung the moon," she told me later that night as we did dishes in my kitchen. "I have never seen you this happy with anyone." She was right. I felt lighter, more confident, more like the best version of myself when I was with David. He had this way of making everyday moments feel special, whether we were grocery shopping or watching Netflix on my couch. I started imagining a future with him, something I had not allowed myself to do with anyone in years. That was when everything changed. It was a Friday evening in early May, and we had plans to try the new sushi place downtown. I arrived at the restaurant first and was scrolling through my phone when I noticed David walking toward the entrance. But he was not alone. Next to him was a stunning woman with long auburn hair and the kind of effortless style that looked expensive even when it was casual. She was laughing at something he said, and the familiarity between them was unmistakable. I watched through the window as David opened the door for her, his hand briefly touching the small of her back, in a gesture I recognized because he did the same thing with me. My stomach dropped as they approached the hostess stand together. When David finally spotted me, his face went completely white. The woman beside him followed his gaze, and her expression shifted from curiosity to understanding to something that looked almost like pity. "Jessica," David said, his voice strained as they reached my table. "I can explain." "This is her, is it not?" the woman said quietly, extending her hand to me with surprising grace. "I'm Claire, and I think we need to talk." The next hour was one of the most surreal of my life. Claire, it turned out, was David's ex-fiancée who had broken up with him 8 months earlier when she decided to take a job in San Francisco. They had been together for 3 years and had planned to get married before her career opportunity came up, and she chose her professional future over their relationship. "I broke his heart," she said simply, stirring her untouched sake. "I knew it when I left, but I thought it was the right choice for both of us. He deserved someone who would prioritize him." David sat between us, looking miserable, occasionally trying to interject, but mostly letting Claire explain. She had come back to Portland that morning to tell him she had made a mistake. Her job in San Francisco was everything she had hoped for professionally, but she was miserable without him. She wanted to try again, to find a way to make both her career and their relationship work. "I did not know about you," she said, looking at me with genuine remorse. "He never mentioned he was seeing someone. I just showed up at his apartment and asked if we could talk." The worst part was that I could not even hate her. Claire was not manipulative or cruel. She was honest about her feelings and respectful toward me even as she was essentially asking for my boyfriend back. And David, despite looking like he wanted to disappear into the floor, was clearly torn. "I need some time to think," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "This is not how I wanted any of this to happen." I left the restaurant that night without eating a single bite of sushi, my mind reeling with everything that had just transpired. In the span of 1 hour, my relationship had gone from solid and promising to uncertain and complicated. The man I was falling in love with was being asked to choose between his future with me and his past with someone he had planned to marry. What happened next would test everything I thought I knew about love, self-worth, and what it means to fight for someone who might already be slipping away. David called me the next morning, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "Can we meet somewhere? I know I have no right to ask, but I need to talk to you face to face." We met at Laurelhurst Park, sitting on a bench overlooking the pond where families were feeding ducks despite the overcast sky. The normalcy of the scene felt almost mocking given the chaos swirling inside my chest. "I should have told you about Claire from the beginning," he said, staring at his hands. "Not because I thought she would come back, but because you deserved to know how serious that relationship was. I thought I had processed it, moved on completely. Meeting you felt like proof that I had." I wanted to be angry with him, but the pain in his voice was too raw, too genuine. "So what happens now?" I asked, surprised by how steady my own voice sounded. "I honestly don't know. Claire wants to move back to Portland. She's willing to take a remote position with her company to make things work between us. She's offering everything she wasn't willing to give before." The knife twisted deeper in my chest. "And what do you want?" He was quiet for so long, I thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his words shattered something inside me. I thought I knew, but seeing her again, hearing her say she wants to try. "Jessica, I loved her for 3 years. I was going to marry her. Those feelings don't just disappear because someone new comes along. Someone new. That's what I was to him. Not the woman he was falling in love with, not his potential future. Just someone new who happened to show up while he was healing from someone else. "I think you just gave me my answer," I said, standing up from the bench. "Take care of yourself, David." He called after me as I walked away, but I kept moving. I had enough self-respect not to beg someone to choose me. If he needed to think about it, if seeing his ex made him question what we had built together, then there was nothing left to discuss. The next 2 weeks were brutal. David texted me constantly, asking if we could talk, saying he was confused and needed time to sort through his feelings. I didn't respond. My friends rallied around me with wine and bad movies, but nothing could fill the hollow ache in my chest or stop me from checking his social media obsessively for clues about his decision. Sarah found me crying into a pint of ice cream one particularly low evening. "You know what the worst part is?" I sobbed. "I actually liked her. Claire was gracious and honest and everything I would want to be in her situation. I can't even hate her for coming back." "That doesn't make what she did okay," Sarah said firmly. "You don't get to disappear from someone's life and then waltz back in when it's convenient, expecting them to drop everything they've built without you." But I knew it wasn't that simple. Love doesn't operate on fairness or convenience. Claire had made a difficult choice 8 months ago, and now she was trying to correct what she saw as a mistake. I couldn't fault her for that, even if it was destroying my happiness. 2.5 weeks after that awful dinner, I saw them together at Powell's bookstore. I was browsing the travel section, dreaming of escape routes, when I spotted David's familiar profile near the fiction shelves. Claire was with him, her hand resting casually on his arm as they looked at something together. They seemed comfortable, natural, like no time had passed at all. I ducked behind a display of bestsellers and watched them for a few minutes, torturing myself with their easy intimacy. This was his choice then. He had chosen his history over our potential future, the known quantity over the beautiful uncertainty we had been building together. I left the bookstore without buying anything and drove straight to my apartment, where I finally allowed myself to fall apart completely. I called in sick to work the next day and spent it in bed, grieving not just for David, but for the version of myself I had been with him. The confident, optimistic woman who believed she deserved to be someone's first choice had been replaced by someone who felt foolish for ever thinking she could compete with a 3-year relationship and an engagement ring. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from concerned friends, but I ignored them all. I needed to wallow, to feel the full weight of this rejection before I could begin to heal from it. That's when my doorbell rang. I considered ignoring it, but the persistent ringing told me whoever was there wasn't giving up easily. I dragged myself to the door, expecting to find Sarah with more ice cream and tissues. Instead, David stood on my doorstep holding a bouquet of sunflowers and looking like he hadn't slept in days. "Before you slam the door in my face," he said quickly, "please happened. Please let me explain let me tell you why I'm here." I stared at him for a long moment, my heart hammering against my ribs. Part of me wanted to shut, protect the door, and what little dignity I had left. But a bigger part of me needed to hear what he had to say, needed closure even if it meant more pain. "You have 5 minutes," I said, stepping aside to let him in. He set the flowers on my coffee table and turned to face me, his hands shaking slightly. "I chose her," he said simply. "For about a week, I chose the safe option, the familiar one. Claire and I tried to pick up where we left off, and it felt comfortable, like putting on an old sweater that still fits." My chest tightened with fresh pain, but I forced myself to listen. "But comfortable isn't the same as right," he continued. "Every time she laughed, I found myself thinking about your laugh. When she talked about her plans for our future, I realized I was comparing everything to the dreams I had started building with you. I kept waiting to feel that spark again, that excitement I remembered from before she left." He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I recognized from our time together. It took me 3 days to realize the spark was never going to come back because my heart was somewhere else. It was with the woman who made grocery shopping feel like an adventure, who listened to my boring architecture stories like they were the most fascinating things she had ever heard. I felt tears threatening, but I blinked them back. So what are you saying, David? I'm saying I made the biggest mistake of my life. I chose the past over the present, fear over hope. Claire is a wonderful person, and I will always care about her, but she's not you. What we had together wasn't just convenient or comfortable. It was magic. He stepped closer, but I backed away, my defenses screaming warnings. You can't just show up here with flowers and expect everything to be okay, I said, my voice shaking with emotion I was trying desperately to contain. Do you have any idea what these past 3 weeks have been like for me? David's face crumpled. I know I hurt you. I know I handled everything wrong from the moment Claire walked back into my life. But Jessica, I need you to understand something. I didn't choose her because I loved her more. I chose her because I was terrified. Terrified of what? Of how much I had started to love you. His voice broke slightly. What we had was so intense, so real, that it scared me. With Claire, everything was already mapped out. We had a history, a plan, a safe path forward. But with you, everything felt brand new and uncertain and absolutely terrifying in the best possible way. I wrapped my arms around myself, trying to hold the pieces together. So when she offered you the easy way out, you took it. Yes. And it was the worst decision I've ever made. He pulled out his phone and showed me a text conversation. Look at this. This was me texting Claire yesterday. I read the messages with growing confusion. David had told Claire that he couldn't continue their relationship, that his heart belonged to someone else, that he was sorry for wasting her time and leading her on. Her responses were surprisingly understanding, even supportive. She said she could tell from the beginning that I was thinking about someone else, David explained. She said she hoped whoever it was knew how lucky she was, and that she deserved someone who would choose her without hesitation. The tears I had been holding back finally spilled over. But you did hesitate. For 3 weeks, you hesitated while I fell apart thinking I meant nothing to you. You meant everything to me. That's why I was so scared. He reached out tentatively, stopping just short of touching my face. Jessica, I have never felt about anyone the way I feel about you. With Claire, love grew slowly over time. But with you, it hit me like lightning. I fell for you so fast and so hard that I panicked when she came back. I wanted to believe him, but the wound was still too fresh. How do I know you won't do this again? How do I know that the next time someone from your past shows up, you won't choose them over me too? Because I learned something these past 3 weeks. I learned that comfortable isn't enough. I learned that history doesn't guarantee a future. And I learned that what we have together is worth fighting for, worth choosing every single day. He dropped to his knees in front of me, not in a romantic gesture, but in desperate supplication. I'm not asking you to forgive me right away. I'm not asking you to trust me immediately. I'm just asking for a chance to prove that you're not my second choice or my backup plan. You're my first choice, my only choice. You're the person with. I stared down. I want to build something real, uttered my heart at him. This man who had échoué and was now trying to piece it back together with words and promises. The logical part of my brain screamed that this was a mistake, that he had already shown me exactly who he was when faced with a difficult choice. But my heart, that traitorous organ, was singing at having him back in my living room, fighting for us. I don't know if I can do this, I whispered. I don't know if I'm strong enough to risk this kind of pain again. You're the strongest person I know, he said, standing up slowly. You walked away from that restaurant with your head held high. You ignored my calls and texts when you needed space. You protected your heart when I didn't deserve access to it. That strength is one of the things I love most about you. Love. He had said the word so casually, but it hung in the air between us, like a bridge I wasn't sure I was ready to cross. David, I started, but he held up his hand. I know I don't deserve another chance. I know I broke something precious between us. But if you'll let me, I want to spend however long it takes earning back your trust. I want to show you every day that you're my choice. Not because someone else isn't available, but because you're the one I choose. I walked to my window and stared out at the street below, watching people go about their normal Friday evening routines. Part of me envied their simplicity. their uncomplicated lives that didn't involve choosing between forgiveness and self-preservation. "I loved you," I said finally, not turning around. "I was falling so hard for you that it scared me too. And then she showed up, and you to look at me. And I realized, looked at her, the way you used that maybe I had imagined the whole thing. Maybe what I thought was special was just ordinary to you." It was never ordinary. His voice was right behind me now. "From that first night in the coffee shop, you turned my world upside down. You made me laugh harder than I had in months. You challenged my opinions and shared your dreams and made me want to be better than I was." Nothing about us was ordinary. I turned to face him, studying his expression for any sign of deception or uncertainty. What I saw instead was raw honesty, vulnerability, and something that looked like hope mixed with desperation. "If I give you another chance," I said slowly, "things have to be different. No more secrets about your past relationships. No more making me feel like I'm competing with ghosts. And if someone else from your history shows up wanting another shot, you need to handle it without destroying what we're building." "Yes," he said immediately. "Absolutely yes to all of that. And I need time. I can't just flip a switch and pretend the last 3 weeks didn't happen. You hurt me, David. Really hurt me. Trust doesn't rebuild overnight." "I understand. I'll wait as long as you need." I looked at him for a long moment. This man who had become so important to me so quickly, who had broken my heart and was now asking for the pieces back. The smart thing would be to send him away, to protect myself from future hurt. But sometimes the smart thing isn't the right thing. "Okay," I said quietly. "We can try, but we're starting over. Not from the beginning exactly, but from a place of honesty about what happened and what we both need going forward." The relief that washed over his face was almost overwhelming. "Thank you," he whispered. "I promise you won't regret giving us another chance." "I hope not," I replied, "because I don't think my heart could survive going through this again." He reached for me then, hesitating until I nodded, then pulled me into an embrace that felt both familiar and foreign. I let myself sink into it for just a moment, allowing myself to remember what it felt like to be held by someone who claimed to choose me. But even as I stood there in his arms, I knew that the real work was just beginning. Words were easy. Promises were simple to make. The true test would come in the days and weeks ahead, in whether David could prove through his actions that I was worth choosing not just once, but again and again, every single day. The road back to trust would be long and uncertain, filled with conversations we should have had months ago and boundaries we needed to establish now. But for the first time in 3 weeks, I felt something other than heartbreak stirring in my chest. It might have been hope, or maybe it was just the dangerous belief that sometimes when someone realizes they've made a terrible mistake, they're capable of doing better the second time around. Only time would tell which one it was. What I didn't expect was how complicated rebuilding trust would actually be. The movies make it look simple. Someone apologizes, the other person forgives them, and everything goes back to normal with maybe a passionate kiss in the rain. Real life is messier, more fragile, and filled with moments that test your resolve when you least expect it. David kept his word about taking things slow. He didn't push for sleepovers or assume we could pick up where we left off physically. Instead, he suggested we start with coffee dates, just like that first night when we met during the storm. It felt both nostalgic and awkward, sitting across from each other at Grind Coffee again, trying to rediscover the easy conversation we once shared. "Tell me about your work," he said during our second attempt at dating. "I feel like I missed so much these past few weeks." I stirred my latte, buying time before answering. We launched the summer campaign for the sustainable denim line. It's been crazy busy, which was honestly good for keeping my mind occupied. He nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I drove by your office building twice last week, not in a stalker way," he added quickly when he saw my expression. "I just hoped I might catch a glimpse of you, see how you were doing." These little admissions were part of his strategy, I realized. David was being almost aggressively transparent about his thoughts and actions, probably trying to prove he had nothing to hide anymore. While I appreciated the honesty, It also felt performative sometimes, like he was checking boxes on a how to win back your ex list. 3 weeks into our tentative reconciliation, we had our first real test. I was scrolling through Instagram while David made coffee in my kitchen when I saw a post from Claire. She was back in San Francisco, smiling at a rooftop bar with friends, the city skyline sparkling behind her. The caption read something about new chapters and trusting the journey. "David," I called out, my voice more strained than I intended. He appeared in the doorway immediately, concern written across his face. "What's wrong?" I showed him the post, watching his reaction carefully. His expression shifted from confusion to understanding to something that looked like regret. "She looks happy," he said simply. "Do you miss her?" I asked, hating myself for the question, but unable to stop it from tumbling out. David set down the coffee mugs and sat beside me on the couch. "I miss the version of us that existed before she left the first time, but that's different from missing her specifically. Does that make sense?" I wanted to say yes, but the distinction felt too subtle for my bruised heart to fully accept. "Sometimes I wonder if you would have ever realized you loved me if she hadn't come back and forced you to choose." "That's not fair," he said softly. "My feelings for you weren't dependent on her return. If anything, her showing up just made me panic about how intense those feelings had become." We sat in uncomfortable silence for a few minutes, both of us probably wondering if we were trying to rebuild something that had been too damaged to save. These moments of doubt became a regular feature of our slow reconciliation, little tests that would pop up without warning and remind us both how fragile our foundation still was. My friends had mixed reactions to David's return to my life. Sarah was cautiously supportive but insisted on a lengthy interrogation when I brought him to family dinner for the first time since the Claire incident. "So, David," she said over my mom's famous lasagna, "what's your plan for the next time an ex-girlfriend shows up wanting another chance?" "Sarah," I warned, but David held up his hand. "No, it's a fair question," he said, meeting her gaze directly. "The honest answer is that I hope I've learned enough about myself and what I want that I wouldn't hesitate like I did before. But I also understand why you're asking and why Jessica needs to know that I'm committed to handling things differently." My mom, ever the diplomat, steered the conversation towards safer topics, but I could see Sarah studying David throughout the meal, looking for cracks in his reformed persona. Later, as we walked to David's car, I brought up her interrogation. "I'm sorry about Sarah. She's just protective." "She should be protective," he replied. "I hurt you badly enough that your family noticed. I'd be worried about your support system if they just welcomed me back with open arms." This kind of self-awareness was new for David, and I found myself appreciating it even as I remained guarded about fully trusting it. People can change, but they can also revert to old patterns when faced with stress or temptation. The real turning point came 2 months after his return, during what should have been a perfect evening. David had planned a surprise date to a gallery opening featuring local artists, something he knew I would love. We were having a wonderful time, discussing the paintings and enjoying the wine and cheese when I spotted a familiar figure across the room. It wasn't Claire this time, but Marcus, my college boyfriend who I had dated seriously for 2 years before we graduated and moved to different cities. He looked good, successful, with the kind of confident smile that had attracted me to him in the first place. I felt David tense beside me when he noticed where I was looking. "Someone you know?" Before I could answer, Marcus had spotted me and was making his way through the crowd. "Jessica? Oh my God, I can't believe it's you." That night tested everything we had rebuilt together. Marcus was charming and nostalgic, asking about mutual friends and sharing updates about his successful marketing firm in Seattle. I watched David watching me, saw him fighting his own demons about past relationships and second chances. When Marcus suggested we grab coffee sometime to catch up, I felt the weight of David's earlier betrayal in my answer. I politely declined and took David's hand, choosing him in the moment when it mattered most. That simple gesture meant more to both of us than any grand romantic declaration could have. 6 months later, We're still taking things one day at a time, building something stronger than what we had before because it's founded on honesty rather than just passion. Love isn't about never making mistakes. It's about learning from them and choosing each other again and again, even when it's scary. What's your experience with second chances in love? Share your story in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, hit that subscribe button for more real relationship stories that might just change how you see love forever.